welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a topic that, well, it kind of feels like something out of a movie.
Yeah.
Killer asteroids. Are we really all just sitting ducks out here in space?
You know, it's funny you should put it that way.
Oh.
Well, we're actually basing this deep dive on an article called Killer Asteroids.
Yeah.
Are we just sitting ducks?
Oh, wow. What a coincidence.
Yeah, so we'll be exploring not just the risks these asteroids pose,
Right.
but also all the incredible science and technology that's going into protecting our planet.
So it's not all doom and gloom then?
Definitely not. It's about understanding the threat
Right.
and what we can actually do about it.
Okay, well, that's reassuring. Now, I gotta admit, when I think about asteroids, I get this image in my head, like an Everest-sized rock hurtling towards Earth.
Right.
Wiping out everything in its path.
Well, that's definitely a dramatic image.
Yeah.
And it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, just look at what happened to the dinosaurs.
Oh, right. The giant asteroid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That impact wiped out something like 75% of all plant and animal life on Earth.
Wow. Okay, so maybe my dramatic image wasn't too far off.
Maybe not.
So, let's get down to the basics here.
Sure.
When we talk about asteroids and the threat to Earth,
Yeah.
what exactly are we talking about?
Okay, so the article focuses on what are called near-Earth objects.
Near-Earth object.
Or NEOs, for short.
Got it, Neo.
These are asteroids and comets that come within, well, a pretty close distance to Earth.
Okay, how? Like, how close are we talking?
Astronomically speaking, of course.
Sure.
We're talking 50 million kilometers of Earth's orbit.
50 million kilometers.
Which sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of space,
Right.
it's practically our backyard.
Okay, so we got these NEOs zipping around our cosmic neighborhood.
Yeah.
How many are we talking about here, and how many should we actually be worried about?
Well, so far, astronomers have cataloged over 30,000 NEOs.
30,000.
And they're finding new ones all the time.
Wow, so that number's just going to keep growing.
Most likely, yeah.
Okay.
Now, out of those 30,000,
Yeah.
about 2,300 are classified as potentially hazardous,
Potentially hazardous.
which means they're large enough and their orbits come close enough to Earth
Oh.
to pose a real threat.
And when you say threat, we're talking more than just a few broken windows.
So, yeah, much more.
Okay, so
We're talking regional devastation,
might wiping out a city?
a city, a small country,
Oh, wow.
even global catastrophes that could trigger mass extinctions.
Okay, so this is serious stuff.
It is.
The article mentions the Chelyabinsk meteor event back in 2013.
Oh, yeah.
That seems like a good example of what even a relatively small asteroid can do.
Absolutely.
Can you remind us what happened there?
So this meteor was only about 20 meters across.
20 meters. That's not that big.
Yeah. Well, it exploded over Russia with the force of 30 atomic bombs.
30 atomic bombs.
Yeah, it injured over 1,500 people,
Oh, wow.
mostly from shattered glass,
Oh, wow.
and caused millions of dollars in damage.
And that was just from a 20-meter rock.
And the crazy thing is, it came from the direction of the sun.
Oh, so we didn't see it coming.
Not a chance.
So how many more of these things are out there that we just haven't seen yet?
That's the scary part.
Yeah.
The article says we've only identified about 40% of the potentially hazardous asteroids out there.
So 60% are still unaccounted for.
Exactly. Lurking in the darkness.
Why is it so hard to detect these things? Space is big, but we've got telescopes and all this amazing technology.
It's true, we have amazing tools, but space is also incredibly vast.
Okay.
And dark.
Right.
And asteroids themselves are often very dark, too.
Oh.
They don't reflect much sunlight.
Ah, I see.
So they're incredibly difficult to spot against the backdrop of space.
So it's like trying to find a tiny black speck on a giant black canvas.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's a good analogy. And to make things even more complicated,
Yeah,
aren't a lot of these asteroids pretty small?
they are.
And they can move erratically, too.
Exactly. It's like trying to find a needle in a cosmic haystack.
Okay, so we're playing this constant game of catch-up,
Yeah.
trying to identify and track these potential threats.
Before they become a problem.
Exactly. So let's talk about time for a second.
Okay.
How much warning would we likely have if we did detect an asteroid on a collision course with Earth?
That's the question everyone wants to know the answer to.
Right.
And it's tough to give a straight answer.
Why is that?
It really depends on so many factors.
Mm-hmm.
The size of the asteroid,
Uh-huh.
its trajectory,
Right.
and how early we detect it.
So it could be years.
Years. Decades.
Decades.
Or even just hours.
Hours, even minutes in some cases.
Oh, wow. Like the Chelyabinsk meteor?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That one caught everyone off guard.
Speaking of close calls,
Yeah.
the article mentions asteroid Apophis.
Ah, yes, Apophis.
It caused quite a stir a few years back, didn't it?
It did.
What happened there?
Well, Apophis is a perfect example of how our understanding of these threats can change.
Right.
See, when it was first discovered...
There was a small but real chance it could hit us in 2029.
Oh, wow.
Luckily,
Yeah.
further observations showed that wouldn't happen.
Phew. That's a relief.
It was the close call, though.
And it showed how important it is to keep monitoring these things.
Absolutely.
You know, the article uses a hypothetical example of a really big asteroid.
Yeah.
Like 2 kilometers wide.
That's huge.
Similar in size to one called 1998 OR2.
Okay.
That one passed us by a few years ago, thankfully.
Oh, good.
But the article paints a pretty scary picture of what would happen if something that size actually hit us.
Yeah, I can imagine.
What would that kind of impact look like?
An impact from a 2-kilometer asteroid would be catastrophic.
Catastrophic how?
We're talking about the energy of hundreds of thousands of megatons of TNT.
Hundreds of thousands.
It would cause massive earthquakes,
Wow.
tsunamis,
Okay.
wildfires,
All at the same time.
all over the planet.
Wow.
Billions of tons of dust and debris would be thrown into the atmosphere,
Oh, no.
blocking out the sun.
Blocking out the sun for how long?
Months.
Months.
Years, even.
Oh, wow.
Temperatures would plummet.
Oh, gosh.
It would be a planet-altering event.
Okay. I'm officially nervous now.
Yeah.
But before we spiral into complete panic,
Right.
let's talk solutions.
Go.
What are we actually doing to prevent this kind of disaster?
So the good news is,
Yeah.
we're not just sitting around waiting for the sky to fall.
Okay, good.
There are a lot of incredibly smart people working on ways to protect our planet.
Okay, I like the sound of that. So what are some of the strategies? What are we actually doing?
Well, the first and most important thing is early detection.
Right, see it coming.
The sooner we know something's headed our way,
Yeah,
the more time we have to react.
makes sense.
So we have initiatives like the NEO Surveyor mission.
NEO Surveyor.
Yeah, it's a new space telescope.
A new telescope specifically for hunting asteroids.
Exactly.
That's great. But what happens if we do find one on a collision course with Earth? What can we actually do to stop it?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
It's not about blowing up asteroids like in the movies.
Oh, yeah. That always seems a bit far-fetched.
What? And it would actually be a terrible idea.
Oh, why is that?
Because you'd end up with a bunch of smaller but still dangerous pieces
Ah.
instead of one big one.
Right, like a shotgun blast of space rocks.
Exactly. So we need to think a little differently.
Okay, so no blowing things up.
Right.
So how do we nudge an asteroid off course?
There are several promising strategies.
Okay.
One of the most exciting is called the kinetic impactor.
A kinetic impactor. What is that?
It's actually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
You basically slam a spacecraft into the asteroid,
Just ram it.
ram it at a very high speed.
Huh.
That impact
Yeah.
transfers energy to the asteroid,
Okay.
which nudges it off course.
So like a cosmic game of billiards.
Exactly. We use a spacecraft as the cue ball.
I like that analogy. And the DART mission you mentioned earlier?
Yes.
That was a test of this concept, right?
That's right. DART stands for Double Asteroid Redirection Test.
Catchy.
In 2022, NASA intentionally crashed a spacecraft
They crashed it on purpose.
into a small asteroid called Dimorphos.
Did it work?
It did. The impact changed the asteroid's orbit.
So we can actually deflect asteroids.
We can.
Wow, that's amazing. But I imagine deflecting a really massive asteroid
Yeah.
would require a much bigger impact.
You're absolutely right.
Right.
DART was a proof of concept.
Okay.
It worked on a small asteroid.
Yeah.
But to move a bigger one,
Right.
we'd need a more powerful spacecraft.
Or maybe even multiple impacts.
Exactly. It's a challenge.
So we've got the kinetic impactor in our planetary defense toolbox.
Yep.
What else are we working with? What if we don't have much time?
Well, in those cases, we
Yeah.
might need something a little different.
Like what?
One idea is the gravity tractor.
A gravity tractor. Is that like a cosmic tow truck?
Kinda.
Yeah.
You position a massive spacecraft near the asteroid and let its gravity gently pull the asteroid off course.
So we're using gravity as a weapon.
In a way, yes.
That's pretty clever. But it sounds like it would take a long time.
It would.
Years.
Decades even.
Definitely a long-term strategy.
So we've got quick interventions with the kinetic impactor
Yeah,
and slow and steady with the gravity tractor.
exactly. We're covering our bases.
Now, what about those more out there ideas? Are there any of those floating around?
Oh, there are always some wild ideas out there.
Okay, what have you heard?
But one that's pretty fascinating involves using the sun itself
The sun?
as a weapon.
How do you weaponize the sun?
You could use giant mirrors
Giant mirrors.
or powerful lasers.
Space lasers now we're talking.
Not quite lasers like in the movies.
Oh.
But the idea is to focus sunlight onto the asteroid,
I see.
vaporize some of its surface,
Okay.
and use that vaporized material as a kind of thruster.
Oh, so you're creating a jet of gas to push the asteroid away?
Precisely. It's called laser ablation.
Laser ablation.
Okay.
Sounds pretty sci-fi.
It does. Is it even possible?
It's definitely on the more futuristic end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But the science is solid.
So maybe someday we'll have a whole fleet of solar-powered asteroid deflectors.
Imagine that.
That's a pretty cool thought. It seems like we have a lot of options,
We do.
but they all depend on one thing. Early detection.
Absolutely. We need to know what's coming.
Right, if we want to have any chance of stopping it.
And as we've discussed, that's not always easy.
So we're in this race against time,
You could say that.
trying to find these asteroids before they find us,
A cosmic game of hide and seek.
with very high stakes.
That's one way to put it.
But what happens if an asteroid gets past our defenses?
That's a question we need to think about.
Yeah.
Even with all our technology,
Yeah.
there's always a chance.
Right, that something could slip through.
And if that happens,
Yeah.
we need to be ready.
To face the consequences.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about that worst case scenario. You know, the one where an asteroid slips past our defenses and it's headed straight for us.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, we have disaster plans for earthquakes, hurricanes, even volcanoes.
Right.
But how do you even begin to prepare for a planet-killer asteroid?
It's a huge challenge for sure.
Yeah.
The scale of an asteroid impact, especially a big one,
Yeah.
is just unlike anything we've ever experienced.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all plan.
Right.
But there are things we can do to at least try to minimize the damage.
Okay, so what would those steps look like? How do we prepare for something like that?
One of the most important things is public awareness.
So people need to know about the threat.
Yeah, they need to understand what's at stake.
Because if people understand the threat,
Exactly.
they'll be more likely to support,
Right.
funding and initiatives and all that.
Exactly. It all starts with awareness.
Okay, so knowledge is power.
It really is.
What else can we do?
Well, besides awareness, we need really good early warning systems.
To give us as much time as possible.
Exactly. And we need solid evacuation plans.
The evacuation plans.
Especially for coastal communities.
Oh, right, because of tsunamis.
Exactly. Tsunamis would be a major threat.
Speaking of tsunamis,
Yeah.
does it matter where the asteroid hits? Like, is an ocean impact better than a land impact?
It definitely matters where it hits.
Okay.
And unfortunately, an ocean impact wouldn't necessarily be less devastating.
Really?
Yeah. Even though it might not cause the same kind of immediate destruction on land,
Right.
it would create these enormous tsunamis.
How big are we talking?
Hundreds of meters high.
Hundreds of meters.
Imagine walls of water crashing onto coastlines.
Wow, that's
It
terrifying.
would be devastating.
And the tsunamis wouldn't just be a local problem, right?
No, they'd affect entire continents.
Wow, I never really thought about that.
And on top of the tsunamis,
Yeah.
all that vaporized seawater from the impact,
Right.
it would get thrown up into the atmosphere,
Oh, no.
creating these massive steam clouds.
And that would mess with the weather.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It could disrupt global weather patterns for years.
So even an ocean impact would be a global catastrophe.
It would.
Okay, so what about a land impact? How bad would that be?
A land impact would be equally catastrophic.
In different ways, I guess.
Yeah, so the impact would create a huge crater,
Miles wide.
potentially. Yeah, and billions of tons of dust and debris would be blasted into the atmosphere.
Blocking out the sun.
Right, creating what's called an impact winter.
Impact winter, I've heard of that. That's where the dust blocks the sunlight and temperatures drop.
Exactly, and this dust cloud could cover the entire planet.
So no sunlight for how long?
It could be months, even years,
Years of darkness and cold.
and that would lead to crop failures,
Yeah.
ecosystem collapse.
Basically the end of the world as we know it.
It would be a very different world.
So in either scenario, ocean or land,
Right,
we're talking about a global catastrophe.
a global event that would affect everyone and everything on Earth.
This is heavy stuff.
It is.
But it's important to remember that
Yeah.
we're not totally helpless.
Absolutely not.
We're learning more all the time.
Exactly.
And developing technology to defend ourselves.
We are, and that's something to be hopeful about.
So what can we do as individuals?
That's a good question.
Besides, panicking?
Right. Well, the most important thing is to stay informed.
Okay.
learn about the threat,
Uh-huh.
learn about the solutions,
Right.
and support the organizations that are working on this problem.
So it's a collective effort.
It is. We're all in this together.
The threat of an asteroid impact is a global challenge.
It is.
It doesn't care about borders or politics.
Right. It's about the survival of our species.
And the preservation of our planet.
It's a reminder that we all share this one home.
And a common destiny.
Exactly. And I think that's a powerful message,
It is.
especially in a world that often feels so divided.
Okay, so as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah,
I want to leave our listeners with a sense of hope
I like that.
and a call to action.
What do you have in mind?
Well, you know this article we've been talking about?
Yeah, killer asteroids. Are we just sin ducks?
Yeah. It does a good job of laying out the urgency of the situation,
It does.
but it also highlights all the progress we've made.
It's a reminder that we're not just sitting ducks.
Exactly. So to our listeners,
Yeah.
I urge you to learn more about this issue.
Yes.
Support the organizations working on planetary defense.
Absolutely.
And most importantly, don't be afraid to look up at the night sky.
And marvel at the vastness of space.
Because in that vastness
Yeah.
lies both danger
And opportunity.
The challenge of killer asteroids reminds us that we're not invincible.
That's true.
But it also inspires us to explore, to innovate, to come together as a species.
To protect our planet.
And our future.
Well said.
It's incredible when you think about it. You know, we've gone from just looking up at the stars and wondering what's out there to actively trying to protect ourselves from them.
It really is remarkable.
It shows you what humans can do when we put our minds to it.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we're not just along for the ride. We can actually shape our own destiny.
Speaking of shaping our destiny,
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about the importance of planetary defense.
Right.
But let's be real for a second.
Okay.
Funding for space exploration and all this asteroid stuff,
Yeah.
it's not always easy to come by.
That's true.
Especially when we have so many problems here on Earth, you know, like poverty and hunger and climate change.
It's a balancing act, for sure.
How do we justify spending money on something that might not happen for hundreds or even thousands of years?
Right. It's tough to think that far ahead.
Especially when there are so many immediate needs.
Exactly. It's a real dilemma.
But as we've discussed,
Yeah.
the threat of an asteroid impact is real.
It is.
It could happen tomorrow or it could happen in 1,000 years.
That's right.
But it could happen.
And we need to be ready.
So how much are we willing to invest in our own survival?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It's not just about science and technology. It's about ethics and philosophy, too.
You're absolutely right.
It's about our responsibility as a species.
To protect ourselves and all life on Earth.
It's humbling when you think about it.
It is.
For all our advancements,
Yeah.
we're still pretty vulnerable out here.
We are just a small part of a much larger universe.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into killer asteroids,
Okay.
I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
I'm listening.
Imagine for a moment that you knew a killer asteroid was headed for Earth,
Oh, wow.
and there was nothing we could do to stop it.
Mm.
What would you do?
Wow. That's a heavy question.
It is
It really makes you think about what's important.
exactly what would matter most to you.
Who would you want to spend your time with?
How would you want to be remembered?
It's a reminder that life is precious.
And that we should make the most of every moment.
Absolutely.
So to our listeners,
Yeah.
I encourage you to reflect on that question.
What would you do if you knew an asteroid was coming?
Let it spark your curiosity.
Ignite your imagination.
And maybe even inspire you to learn more about the incredible work being done to protect our planet.
Because even though the threat is real,
Yeah.
so is our potential to overcome it.
We have the knowledge, the technology, and the will to survive.
We just need to work together.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this cosmic journey.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep looking up, keep exploring, and keep asking the big questions.